Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to this meeting, to this webinar. Today we are discussing threats affecting the Zimbabwean media. This is the discussion is being hosted by Interwatch, and I would like to say this is the third webinar being hosted in Southern Africa. The first one was Botswana. The second one was Mozambique, and last week we were discussing threats affecting South Africa. So this week we're discussing threats affecting Zimbabwe, and you'll find that in the three discussions, three webinars that we've had so far, they've been quite interesting. The threats, we found similarities in some areas and differences in some areas. For instance, in Mozambique, the biggest threat was that journalists can be killed in the course of discharging their work. In South Africa, the biggest threat were SLAPS litigation, which is basically aimed at disabling the media and so forth. And Botswana, there was concern around issues to do with surveillance of journalists and so forth. But today we are discussing Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has its own fair set of challenges, and the background to this discussion is that Interwatch commissioned a research around threats affecting the media in the region. And we have the co-author of the Zimbabwean report, Mary Taruvinga, whom I will ask to introduce herself shortly and also share with us the main findings. From there, I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves before going into the meat, before discussing the bones and what have you of this report and the threats that are affecting Zimbabwe. Among the panelists, we have Mary Mundeya. She is the managing editor of She Corresponds Africa. This is an all-female newsroom in Zimbabwe. She's an investigative journalist and who's trying to forge her way into media entrepreneurship and would really want to find what the challenges have been there she has met and how she has managed to overcome those, and also challenges affecting young women in journalism. We also have the president of the Young Journalists Association of Zimbabwe, that is Leopold Munhende. Leo is passionate about issues to do with survival, the economic hardships, salaries, and has been vocal about those issues. So we'll give him a platform to speak. Both economic threats are real, and they've been big on the Zimbabwean landscape. Among the panelists is Njabulo Ncube, who is the national coordinator of the Zimbabwe National Editors Forum. We can't have a discussion without the editors, because they're the ones who decide what is on the front page, what gets prominence in news, and so forth. We also have the chairperson of the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe, Nigel Nyamutumbu, who's with us here. And of course, we have Blessed Mhlanga. Blessed is a senior journalist with Alpha Media Holdings, and as colleagues here would know, is currently facing a number of challenges. We'll ask him to speak about his journey, the challenges, and so forth. So let me start with Mary. Mary, may you kindly introduce yourself?
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Mary Taruvinga, and I'm a reporter with newzimbabwe.com. But on this report, I worked with Owen Gagare. It's quite an extensive document, so I won't be getting into so much detail. I will just give you the main findings of our report. And when we were doing this report, we talked to different journalists from both the private media and the state media. We also talked to some media representative organizations such as MISA, media monitors, and so forth, the Zimbabwe Union of Journalists. So it covered so many areas. Going straight into the report, our main findings were that in Zimbabwe there is repression against the journalists has evolved from direct censorship to violence in more sophisticated tactics. You find that in present day, authorities use tactics like lawfare to intimidate journalists, whereby they use laws, they use courts, and arrest to intimidate journalists. There is also issue of surveillance, whereby mobile phones are monitored. Internet activity is also monitored, as well as communication. There's also digital intimidation, whereby there's online harassment and cyber attacks. Besides that, we also have issues like economic pressure, the issue of poor salaries, and financial instability among journalists. There's also the issue of political capture, whereby there's influence over media ownership and the issue of licensing, as well as media capture. What we established is that these tactics create fear, and they encourage self-censorship in journalists, and this also weakens investigative journalism. Talking a bit about lawfare, is when there's use of arrest, use of laws, and court processes as weapons against the journalists, instead of openly banning reporting. You'll find that authorities use criminal charges, investigations, repeated court appearances, pre-trial detention to intimidate journalists. Even though at times journalists are acquitted, the process of getting arrested, going through the court is just the same as a punishment. It comes with legal costs, psychological pressure, damage reputation, and also fear. There's the issue of laws, such as the Broadcasting Service Amendment Act 2025. This law strengthens executive control over broadcasting. It gives the president power to appoint the BAZ board. It also expands regulation to internet, and it also forces broadcasters.
She's calling. She's talking.
Sorry. It also forces broadcasters to air what is called government hour when it comes to state media. When we were talking to critics, they said this increases state influence and over licensing and digital and content regulation. There's also the Cyber Data and Protection Act 2021. The act also expands surveillance and monitors powers. It allows monitoring of internet communications, data retention
The teacher deleted.
by service providers, and also access to digital information during investigations and broad state surveillance powers. Journalists said they fear that the law is being used to monitor their sources, investigate critical reporting, and criminalize journalism. There's also Interception of Communications Act, which, among other things, gives authorities power to intercept phone calls, emails, and internet activities.
For me.
Telecommunications companies can also be required to share subscriber information with authorities. What we found is that this sort of threatens source protection, investigative journalism, as well as whistleblowers. There's also surveillance and digital intimidation. Our report found out that there's evidence of increased surveillance of journalists and also on activists. Phones are monitored, social media is tracked. There's also hacking of websites. This has happened to some of local publications. There's also phishing attacks targeted at journalists and monitoring of their online conversations. The journalists we talked to, they said they fear that their communication with their sources is no longer secure. Coming to the issue of arrest and intimidation of journalists, I'll start by the arrest of a senior reporter who works for AMH, Leopold Mhlanga, who was arrested last year after he interviewed the late war veteran Blessed Geza, who was criticizing the president's continued stay in office and calling for his resignation. He was investigated by the counterterrorism unit and spent over 70 days in pre-trial detention, which is something which instills fear in other journalists. There's also the arrest of Leopold, who was arrested several times, I think between 2020 and 2021. He was charged over social media posts and also over anti-corruption reporting. Police conducted a raid at his residence and broke his doors when they arrested him. He said he felt that he was targeted because he had exposed corruption involving politically connected individuals and also supporting anti-government forces. There's also the arrest of the likes of Rachel To and Mark Chakunduka back in 1999, when they published a story alleging a coup plot in 1999. There's also the issue of Itai Zamara, who was abducted while he was at a barber shop in 2015. He had been protesting against the government failures and economic decline, and to date, Zamara remains missing. The co-author of this report, Owen Gagare, was also arrested over a report on alleged attacks on the military and opposition leaders, and he was placed under surveillance, which placed him in a tight space and feared for his family. The likes of Zimbabwe Independent editor Faith Zaba, he was also arrested last year for publication of a satirical article commenting on the arrest and intimidation of journalists in Zimbabwe. The satire criticized shrinking democratic space and growing targeting of journalists. Arrests raised concerns that even satire, commentary, or opinion writing are increasingly being treated as criminal or politically threatening by authorities. There's issue of online harassment and gender attacks. whereby we found out that women face online abuse, sexual harassment, and smear campaigns. They sort of coordinated cyber attacks with our reporting finding that at least 63% of female journalists experienced technology-facilitated gender violence. This happens through pro-attacks, smear campaigns, threats of violence, cyberbullying, disinformation campaigns, and also coordinated attacks by pro-government social media groups. For example, we have a senior reporter at AMH as well, Miriam Mankwaya, who was attacked after publishing a story about school reopening plans that was during the COVID time. Despite that, it was a shared byline with another senior male reporter. She is the one who was attacked online, and she also faced the sort of coordinated abuse from social media users, particularly from the ruling party. When we talked to her, she said this has reduced her confidence and limited her social media activity, that to date she rarely posts on X. I'll also talk about my case study myself. I was threatened when I was working on an investigation on lithium mining investments. The intimidation started way before I started my reporting, and after the story was out, the company started sending letters to my employer, threatening lawsuits, and I was later summoned to the Chinese embassy over my article, and they gave me a statement which was equally as good as a retraction to my story. But I refused to work on it and told them to go ahead and sue me, and that I will stand by my story. Why this matters? You see that this illustrates this political intimidation. There's also the issue of foreign diplomatic pressures and surveillance concerns. In passing, I also talk about pressure, financial pressure, which is weakening journalism in Zimbabwe. You find that journalists go for, some of the media houses, journalists go for months without salaries. They work without proper equipment. There's the issue of lack of transport for assignments. Some earn around or even less than $100 per month. As a result, you find that journalists become vulnerable to issues like bribery. Self-censorship also increases. Some of the experienced journalists leave the profession and to look for greener pastures. All this, we found out that there is when journalists are threatened, corruption at times it goes unreported because journalists will fear the consequences. The issue of public accountability also weakens. Citizens also lose reliable information. And you find that fear will end up replacing open debate. What we also find is that a free media is essential for democracy and human rights and transparency, as well as accountability. And I think for now I'll end here.
Thank you so much, Mary, for summarizing the report. And yeah, at this juncture, I would want to introduce our panelists. May you briefly, in 30 seconds, kindly introduce yourselves I'll start with the Young Journalists Association. Leo, in 30 seconds, can you introduce yourself?
All right, thank you so much. My name is Leopold Munhende. I'm the Young Journalists Association president. I write for newszimbabwe.com, and the Young Journalists Association is primarily focused on highlighting issues which affect the cubs within journalism. And I think my 30 seconds is up.
Okay, thank you so much, Leo. I'll move to Mary. Mary, may you kindly introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Mary Mundeya. As Owen said in the introductory remarks, I'm the managing editor for an online or female media outlet called She Corresponds Africa. Apart from that, I'm an investigative journalist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. The editors, ZINEP coordinator, national coordinator, Njabulo, may you kindly introduce yourself? Hello, maybe we've lost Njabulo briefly. Nigel, may you kindly introduce yourself? Nigel is with the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe. And also tell us what is Media Alliance of Zimbabwe.
Yes, thanks, Owen, and greetings, colleagues. My name is Nigel Nyamutumbu, coordinator with the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe. The Media Alliance of Zimbabwe is a network of journalistic professional associations and media support organizations who basically are united in defense of freedom of expression, a professional media, and media plurality and diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Blessed, may you kindly introduce yourself?
Thank you. My name is Blessed Mhlanga.
We are losing you. Okay, I think we're having problems with the connection there, but Blessed Mhlanga is a senior journalist at Alpha Media Holdings, and as we know, he was also arrested last year, so hopefully the communication improves so that he can share his story, and they are waiting for him. He's currently outside the country, but he's under real threat. Okay. Now we can move into our discussion, and colleagues, you are free to contribute. What you can do is basically raise your hand so that I can pick you, and that you can also write your question in the chat, and I'll be able to read it out so that the panelists can answer. But we're not assuming that they know everything. There's a host of knowledge amongst us. So we're also free to make contributions from the floor. So this is a free meeting. May we be civil, and no insults. Can we just raise our points? This is not a debate. Basically, it's a discussion. And may we just raise our points in a professional manner, so that we maintain respect amongst ourselves. Okay, thank you so much for that. I'll kick off the discussion with a question towards Nigel. Nigel, I know you've been involved as the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe in lobbying against laws, and yet legal threats are amongst the big threats that Zimbabwean journalists are facing. So we are going to deal with that. How has that lobbying gone, and which particular laws are you concerned about as journalists and also as media CSOs?
All right. Thanks for that particular question, Owen. And for coordinating this conversation at a time such as this. I think May is quite a prudent and critical month for the media sector, as a time that we observe World Press Freedom Day. That is on the 3rd of May annually. So in that light, the conversation
I think I'm gonna go
is
to the bathroom.
to come to your question. Before I really jump into specific laws or provisions thereof of the legal framework, I think it is imperative for us to start by really just discussing what I would broadly term using the best approach, the political, economic, social, and technological challenge.
Sorry, Nigel. Sorry, Nigel.
Yes.
As expected, we're having some disruptions. People are talking. Sistipo, may you kindly mute or remove those that are disturbing? Let us have a civil discussion, and all. We appreciate diverse opinions. And if people have opinions, they are free to air them out. But please do not disturb. And Sistipo, may you kindly remove or mute those that are disturbing. Nigel, you can go ahead.
Bro, I just want to go to the bathroom.
Yes, certainly. I would imagine that is already one of the threats to free expression, where we are in the middle of an important conversation, and there is some who are evidently hacking or at least attempting to the particular conversation. But anyway, the point I was making fundamentally was that from a standpoint, before we go to the specific provisions of the law, is to try and assess and ascertain how the media in Zimbabwe in particular is perceived or is construed to be. The Constitution posits that the media is an agent of freedom of expression. It is the medium at which diverse views are expressed. It is the medium at which citizens may access information, and our cultural industries expanded, and so will our local languages, and so forth. That is the thinking of the supreme law, as it were, in sections 61, 62 of the Constitution, and other provisions that speak to that particular right, being section 57, which speaks to the right to privacy, or even section 61, that also speaks to the confidentiality of journalistic sources as a prudent right, which then suggests, if we are to use the Constitution or the supreme law as the basis or the benchmark of how the media is perceived in the country. But there is definitely an evident disjuncture. There's an evident political culture that really is at crosshead with what the Constitution provides for. So never mind the specific laws that are then supposed to give effect to the rights espoused in the Constitution. Because what you then have is a political culture, and this is across the board, the ruling party and in opposition circles, wherein the culture or the perceived role of the media within the political sphere is that the media's role is to propagate the ideas of the ruling elite and to make them known and to make them accepted and to have them embedded within society. And by the same token, those that belong to the alternative or to the opposition are of that view that the media is also to propagate what they stand for, or what reform, or what change, or what a democracy ought to look like from their standpoint. And the media should then be reflective of that. And to that extent, what you then find is you get a regulatory framework which then tries to safeguard the political culture. In other words, you then get the government on one hand, or the government which is made up of the ruling party anyway, on one hand, wanting a media regulatory framework or a legislative framework that ensures that any dissenting view or any view that speaks or that is against those of the ruling elite are met either within are controlled or are actually silenced. So if you look at how the regulatory framework is conceived, initially via AIPA, which has now been repealed, and which, as part of the lobbying that we have done, is no longer within our statutes. But the idea then was we need to control those that are going to own or have access to the channels of expression. And there has to be, some set control measures to ensure that whoever has that is going to really be within the whims of power, be within the whims of government policy or of the ruling ideas. We fast forward, AIPA had become redundant anyway with the emergence of new technologies. I think the space opened itself up before we could, or before the state could open it up, because we people could naturally now not necessarily need a license to have a mass market or a mass audience. That had been taken care of by the emergence of online media and so forth. But the subsequent legislation that then followed upon the repeal of AIPA, you look at your Cyber and Data Protection Act as read together with the Criminal Law and Codification for Reform Act, beginning now to seek ways to encroach the same mentality of controlling narratives, the same mentality of as much as possible either having a hanging thread, a threat, or having provisions with a chilling effect on the practice of free expression or of journalism, or where in essence you have a culture that promotes self-censorship. You have provisions around insults laws, as an example. You have provisions on publication of falsehoods. You have criminal defamation, which had been outlawed in terms of the repeal of IPA and the Constitutional Court pronouncement, being sneaked back via the back door with some of the provisions that are in the code and that are in the Cyber and Data Protection Act, all of which, as I say, speak to the political culture. Yet we've made some significant changes. I think we now have a media policy which is a starting point into us beginning to escalate or to amplify reform discourses. We've got a media practitioners bill, which is being put forward to strengthen self-regulatory mechanisms as one way. We do also have some policy dialogues to have convergence, which in a way may see the back of the Broadcasting Services Act as it is currently configured, and which may potentially see a broader shift in how the media is regulated. We may also perhaps begin to see a shift in the funding of the media by policy, whether in terms of a converged tax regime or a converged fund, and so forth, and multiple policy propositions that are at the table. But suffice to say, these have to be underpinned by a political will to ensure that the media is a medium of various contesting views and not a propaganda tool. I'll end here for now.
Thank you so much, Nigel. Before I ask the next question, Rihanna had a hand up and she wants to respond on issues around the laws. Rihanna, can you come in?
Yeah, thanks so much, Owen. First of all, thank you to Intel Watch and everyone who has contributed to this report, and to many colleagues who who I've worked with on the issue around policy and the legislation. So I listen, it's a topic on its own. It's a huge topic, but let me just touch on a few things. I think it is critical to understand that, and I think you've mentioned it already, that the biggest threat comes from the legislative framework, okay? Because that is the one that will always be used to curtail journalists and their work from a legal standpoint. And this is where I feel that the biggest issue is the media don't take an interest as much as they should around the legislative framework. I think it's very critical to understand it. And, we're not lawyers. And of course, we won't really get to the nitty-gritty of each piece of legislation. But, it would be good for us as the media sector to have a grip on some of the contentious clauses contained within the legislation, but to also be able to frame our responses to why they are contentious clauses. It's not enough just to know, listen, this is a bad piece of law, or this is a law that's going to work against us. Be very aware of the clauses that are, contentious, that pose a threat, and why they pose a threat, and why it impacts on us, and how we should counter the narrative that comes from the state, especially when because the state's framing around many of the issues is very sound. When putting it out to the public, they make it sound like there's something that is valuable and is necessary. So we have to have an effective counter narrative. The other thing is that advocacy takes a very long time. I remember that IPA came in during a time when I was in the mainstream media and part of MISA. And so, we started advocating against it from that time. In fact, an adverse report that was then, put together by MISA was taken to, Minister Edson Riobgo for the, for use in Parliament. So that's another thing as well. It may be that you start lobbying and your advocacy work, and it will take years before you see any fruition of that. And you saw that. IPA was only repealed a couple of years ago. So that was like 2 decades of work before anything concrete happened. So that's another understanding we should have, that advocacy and lobbying is very long-term. It's it requires commitment. It requires persistence as well. My third point, my last point will be, you also have to not just be aware of legislation in your country, because I think, if you look at most of the data protection laws and cyber security laws, they contain clauses that impact on media, on freedom of expression, and on access to information. And it's almost template legislation across the continent. So I think it's also very useful to understand the African Union instruments that are there, and in particular, the ACHPR Declaration on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information. What are the rights that are contained, and how we should then frame whatever it is or anchor our advocacy and lobbying against these pieces of legislation. Those were my 3 points. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rihanna, for that valid contribution here. And also thank you, Nigel, for the contribution for summarizing basically the laws that we have and what needs to be done, and also the framework that we're operating in. Blessed, who's one of our panelists, has got another engagement and will be leaving in the next 30 minutes. So I need to give him a chance. And it's also good that we're talking about laws and the weaponization of laws, because he is one of the journalists that has a court case hanging over his head. So we want to speak about that. But Blessed, I also have a question in my inbox, which is directed at you. So before you speak about the persecution, I want to go back. Someone says here that before 2017, and I think it's also mentioned in the report, you mentioned it in the report, that you generally played a role to make sure that as a journalist, Mnangagwa's message is heard, and you were seen generally as close to those that are in power today. But something changed over time, and you've become a marked man. We want, before we go into the persecution, we want to understand how that relationship deteriorated, what sort of relationship you had with the president, and also what you did around 2017, and how things then turned sour. How did you become a marked man?
Thank you, Owen. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Beautiful. So Owen, I never had a relationship with the president. What I remember, you were my boss at Alpha Media Holdings. I was the Beru chief, the Alpha Media Holdings Beru chief in Midlands, and President Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa was based in Midlands, and most of all his support base and support structure was based in Midlands, and therefore naturally, as a person who had been in Midlands for a very long time, I had the inside knowledge and sources within President Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa's power matrix. And also because we believed, as you are aware, Owen at Alpha Media Holdings, we believed strongly in the freedom of expression. you would agree with me, Owen, that Professor Jonathan Moyo is one of the people who when he was minister, he fought against the Alpha Media Holdings and its titles. But the first publication that was to give him a space and a voice was the Zimbabwe Independent, when he got out of power through the 2017 military coup. So at the back and basis of what we have always done as journalists is to give everyone a voice. And unfortunately, there are certain people in the clique that surrounded the president, President Emerson Mhlanga, that felt that, I should serve their interests and not serve the interests of the people that we serve as journalists. And I think this is where the problem emanated. They expected me to report in a manner that probably solidified ties. But I always say this, first and foremost, I'm an information prostitute. I sleep with whoever has information because information is my currency. I hope that satisfies that. And maybe because also these people that I've worked with in the past, they actually knew and understood my resolve in terms of giving people a voice. So when Alpha Media Holdings also started giving a voice to Blessed Geza when he was speaking and his colleagues, because they had worked with me during that time, they automatically thought that it would be me who would be giving Geza the voice. So they sought to deal with me in a manner that would stop Geza from getting access to the platform that Alpha Media Holdings has created over these years, and with such amazing and massive journalism that takes place there. But I want to deal with the issue that we are talking about now, Owen, the mapping threats to the media in Zimbabwe. The biggest threat to the media in Zimbabwe or anyone else in Zimbabwe at the moment, Owen, is not these laws. It's not these laws. I just want to be radical on this. It's not these laws. In fact, it is a judiciary that has been compliant to and has allowed itself to be used to silence people. The Constitution is very, very clear. A person on arrest has a right to bail, right? They have a right to bail. And they've also a right to a speedy trial. And Section 70 of the Constitution goes further to say any person who is arrested and where a charge has been put against them has the right to presumptions of innocence until proven guilty. Now we have a journalist who was arrested on February 18, who remains in prison to date. That person, that journalist, is serving a prison sentence even before the matter is heard. Is serving a prison sentence. So no matter the kind of laws that are there, whether the laws are going to be very, very good, but if a judiciary, which is the last defense in a democracy, allows punishment by pre-trial detention, we can have as many laws as we want, as many good laws as we want. But what then happens is that an allegation can just be made against you. For instance, in my place, I was accused of having broadcast a press conference. Now, I wanted to correct Madame Mundeya that I was not arrested for interviewing Geza. There is no charge whatsoever for interviewing Geza. My charge is for broadcasting a press conference, right? Now, I am not a broadcaster. I do not broadcast. The government knows that HSTV is the broadcast. So if you have a charge of broadcasting, you charge the broadcaster. You don't charge a journalist, an employee. Now, out of the 200 employees that are employed by Alpha Media Holdings, they chose me. They arrested me. They kept me in prison for 3 months. And at the end of 3 months, as an afterthought, they then started charging HSTV. But all the while, they had not charged HSTV. So it is not about the law. I think we need to be able to find ways of protecting the integrity of the judiciary, of protecting judicial officers. Because in the absence of an independent judiciary that exercises the law, no matter what laws are there. I'll give you an example. Do you know at one point, Hopo Chingono was charged and denied bail over a criminal offense that did not even exist in the statutes. It did not even exist. It took him to apply to the High Court for the matter, for the High Court to say, but this criminal case does not exist in our statutes. And all prosecutors who are learned colleagues, these things, I've done them in the first year of law school. A whole magistrate who is now a judge denied someone bail over a law that did not exist. Job Sikala, to this day, as I know it, is suing the state. He was kept in prison for 2 years, being denied bail, for a matter that did not exist, a charge that did not exist in our statute books. The first thing for any charge is there must be a law, right? Look at the Broadcasting Services Act, as Nigel Nyamutumbu was saying, right? It wants people to be licensed to be broadcasters, right? But who is not a broadcaster in Zimbabwe? Who is not a broadcaster? Because what is the definition of broadcasting in terms of the Broadcasting Services Act? What it basically means is anyone who broadcasts a video, a skit on their YouTube page, on their Facebook page, on their X page, they are broadcasting, and they must be given licenses. Right. The journalist who is currently at Harare Remand Prison, who is currently at Harare Remand Prison, is being charged for broadcasting without a license. But is he Blawayo 24? Has he done anything that Madam Boss does not do? Has he done anything that DJ Ola does not do? But do those people have licenses? So the issue is not really at the moment where we are. Of course, we need to deal with the laws and we need to make sure that the laws, but we must not forget that at the center of this, it is the judiciary, a judiciary that interprets laws fairly, that ensures that anyone who's arrested is treated in a manner that makes people, respect the administration of justice. Because once the administration of justice is not respected, it becomes everyone's game. I thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Blessed, for setting the context. It was important for everyone to understand the nature of relationship that you had with the president and those that are around him, and I think you explained it quite well. Yeah, it's the duty of journalists to give all sides an opportunity to speak out, even those that are being denied access. So thank you for explaining that, and also for your opinions that it's not really the laws, although others argue that the laws themselves are bad, while the judges and the magistrates, the judiciary is also captured, which is also another thing that we as journalists have to contend with. So before we let you go, we want to understand during this time, how have you been able to function? Because we want to look at the implications. What happens when a journalist is put under pressure, as you are? We understand that you are outside the country. You've been saying you're coming, but you've not come, and these guys are waiting for you. What kind of pressure does it give to you as an individual, and also to family and friends?
I think thank you, Owen. I mean, the past 3 months of my life have been the worst, the worst ever anyone can wish for, Owen. At the moment, I am with an institution which takes care of mental health, because the state of my mental state is broken down. Owen, it's not easy to go into prison and stay in prison for 3 months, staying with armed robbers, alleged armed robbers, staying with some of the worst people, sleeping next to them in one of the most horrific conditions that one can stay, and also being unable to see your family, your children. I have been diagnosed with a severe lung infection that affected me whilst I was in prison. So I'm currently undergoing through a medical treatment for that for that condition. I am not yet in a space to be able to return to Zimbabwe, because as you are aware, there are also a lot of threats that have come through me through social media. People who have recorded videos saying that I should be beaten up, I should be killed. And after experiencing 3 months in prison, and after experiencing the horrific incidences that I experienced during my incarceration, my mental health was seriously affected. And my doctors believe that it is not good for my mental health to return to Zimbabwe at this moment, because it would invoke new stress and trauma into my health. So I am currently undergoing treatment. I'm unable to visit my family, to see my family. I am unable to work for them and provide for them, just basically to send them to school. So I've had to sell my assets. I've had to sell certain things that I had got, so that I take care of my family. It is the most painful and horrific moment. To suffer just because we have given other people voices, just because of a chosen profession that you and me, Owen, have done over the years with little reward, so to speak. You'd understand that media organizations at the moment are struggling to pay salaries for their employees, and therefore I can say this without fear of contradicting myself, that even as I am out of the country and struggling, I've received little or no support from my employer, not because they don't want to support me, but because they are actually incapacitated in doing so, as business is really, really bad. So when these are some of the things that I've suffered, and it's sad because of the effect, the chilling effect that it has on other media professionals who are now being forced to self-censor, not to be able to tell the story. I remember one colleague who was requesting for Geza's number when Geza was still alive, and when I gave him the number and I told him that the police were looking for me for having broadcast, for allegations of having broadcast Geza's interview. You know what he said to me? He said, I'm not going to call him. I'm not going to touch him. I don't want to be in trouble. And this is the effect of it, because when people watch, I would go to court, and in court you'll be by, after I was released from prison, you'll be by yourself, and you are standing there, and the pain that you are going through, the pain that your family is going through, is unjustified. It's unjustified. And even when I failed to come back to Zimbabwe because of mental health issues, I tried to get support from various institutions, but every other institution will tell you one excuse or the other. But when you're in prison, they're quick to be writing solidarity messages, to be, and when you are in need and stressed and hamstrung and you want help, they are not there. There's absolutely nothing as painful as that, as finding yourself alone, especially when you are just committed to public service, to public good, by delivering news that builds the nation. So, Owen, that is my current state. I'm in pain. I'm hurt, and my family is hurt, and it's just not good. It's just not good. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Blessed, for sharing even deeply personal stuff. We wish you well. There is a question on the inbox, but maybe we'll come back to it later. Butle had her hand up. Butle, would you kindly make a contribution before we move on to maybe to economic threats?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Owen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so my contribution, I think I'm just going to restrict it to, and we'll link it to what Rihanna said when she spoke about advocacy. Because I think for me, of course, obviously, the challenges or threats affecting the media, I think there are like so many of them. It's not one of those things where obviously we can't discuss it and exhaust the issues in one day. There are many, but I'm going to go back to the advocacy that Rihanna talked about and say, yes, advocacy does take a long time. I mean, I remember when I was at the Media Alliance, sitting down with lawyers and coming up with the draft ZBC bill. Because at that point, one of the issues that we were struggling with as a media sector was this issue of, ZBC, I think around 2008-9 had become very apparent, particularly after the presidential elections of 2008, that I think with something that we had discussed before, but then become very apparent that, ZBC was not behaving like a public broadcaster, and then there were all these issues about, is it a state broadcaster, is it public broadcaster, and all that. And so as the Media Alliance, we then came up with the idea of, okay, let's come up with a draft ZBC bill. And I think we took quite a long time, to come up with that bill, number of lawyers that were involved. But I want to then say, you find that I think over the years as well as the media sector, I think we sort of maybe lose steam in some instances, because, for example, now because I think now we've gotten to a point where perhaps many of us have even given up on ZBC, right? But I think, in my view, a public broadcaster still has a role to play in our context, right? In Zimbabwe, maybe Africa as well, but I think in our context specifically. And I think I'd also like to say, I remember when I was the coordinator, one of the things that we did was we had a lot of like road shows, if you want to call them. We just went around Harare initially, I think, but then we had a few trips to Lawai, where we just engaged community members to get their views about ZBC. And one of the things that struck me particularly was, I think, the one meeting we had in, what's this? Highfield. I think it was Cyril Jennings Hall, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I mean, it was in the morning around 10, 11, right? Because I think we'd said, I think for that particular one, we're specifically targeting, women who were at home, like your housewives, because 10 to 11, 12, they're at home working in the house, but, maybe they'll leave around 12 to go and pick up the kids from school. So we wanted to catch them before, they left home. What really shocked us, and I remember I went with Fazila to that meeting as Fazila Mohammed. One of the things I think that struck both of us was that these are women, like, they're like housewives, so they spend most of the time at home. But when we were speaking about ZBC, they had a lot to say. They I don't know. I think there was something about the way we perceived what they would think about ZBC and the need for a public broadcaster, because I think at that time we were also doing that. At the same time, saying we were also saying that as a country we need to have community broadcasters, like community radio stations, right? So it was surprising. It's just a pity. I think I had obviously had those recordings on my phone, but don't know where they are. I think all of those phones which I lost, and I hadn't bothered to say it, because the women spoke out very strongly about, we also want to have our own radio stations, because sometimes things happen within the local neighborhood and we don't really know, and they were like, but it's also important. They're saying we also need to have ZBC doing what it used to do in the past, right? So you had women in their 30s, 40s saying, no, but when we were younger, we know that ZBC used to give us information. Now we can tell that there's something wrong, right? So you find that our advocacy, I think, really spoke to what the women were speaking about. Maybe we're using slightly different language, but we're speaking about the same principle, right? The same issues. So I think for me, the issue is for the media sector to go back in terms of the advocacy, go back to basics, to say, how do we then involve everybody else? Because sometimes when the media sector, and I say this is somebody who's both sides really, I've got one leg in, one foot in, one foot out. I think for me, a lot of the times when I hear the media sector talking about the challenges and stuff, and I'm one of them, obviously, I get the sense that we don't necessarily involve anybody else who's not in the media, right? So that we are then saying, as a group, we are upset that, we don't like what is happening to the media sector. But I think then in terms of our advocacy, we then don't alert the other people. Like, we don't then make it obvious. We don't then include other people. So in the end, it then sounds like it is a fight for the media only. But in my view, it's not, because if we're talking about freedom of expression, that is everybody. It shouldn't just be that we are fighting for the media to freely express itself. It should be that we are fighting for everybody in the country, right? Even the citizens. We are saying everybody must have the right, and the environment, not just the law, but also just the environment should allow for any citizen to come up and say, no, I am happy about this, I'm not happy about that. So I think that's, for me, there's a missing link, I think, in terms of our advocacy. I think we need to do more in terms of strengthening the advocacy, but also I think we would benefit from involving members of the community, not just because sometimes it looks like we are just doing it as in silos, as in we are the media, so we are concerned about our issues. But I think if we are looking at the media as the fourth estate, what does that mean? It necessarily means that we then have to make the citizens see what it's important for them. If the media is free, it means they are also free. But I think right now, maybe not so much. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Bushle, and for highlighting that the need for the media to include other stakeholders, the communities, the readers, the listeners, and so forth in engagement and also in advocacy. One of our panelists, Njabulo, is also tied with time, and he is the national coordinator of the Editors Forum. Njabulo, may you discuss how are the operations in the newsroom in this tough environment where there are tough laws, where there are laws that can be weaponized against journalists, and also where the judiciary is captured? How difficult is it, or how easy is it for journalists to operate in such an environment? Is self-censorship real? And also, may you also touch, because we want to move into the economic situation, about the economic situation and how it is affecting journalism.
Thank you very much, Owen. Thank you very much for this, Owen and team, for this incisive report. It comes at a very opportune time. I would like also to pay tribute to the speakers that have spoken before me. I want to. I was intrigued by the chapter on financial ruin, poor salaries, and deplorable conditions. This speaks of the issue arising around self-censorship. You find that because of poor salaries and deplorable working conditions, journalists now tend to censor themselves. There are people that they are not reporting on or writing about because they are now thinking of their pockets. As editors, that worries us a lot. A case in point is the case of Mr. Chivai. If you've been following the developments, you see what he did at one of our radio stations. Do you expect our journalists at that particular radio station, this is our worries editors, to write about this individual who has donated lunch money and cars to our newsrooms? That brings the issue arising of self-censorship. People are self-censoring themselves because of their stomachs. This is a cause for concern for our editors. As editors, we are happy that Zim Papers has taken a stance to say, let's adhere to our policy regarding. We really want to, as we discuss and unpack this incisive report that Owen and team have produced, we want to applaud Zim Papers for taking that stand. People might say editors are selfish. They don't want their reporters to be rewarded. But the moment we allow that to happen, we are actually degrading our profession. We are thrashing our ethics as a profession. I really wanted to talk about that. This is what is leading to self-censorship. We are not saying there are no poor salaries in our newsrooms. Yes, it's because of the economy. People have spoken about the impact of the economy as one of the threats to the media. So my point, Owen and team, is that self-censorship is due to economic hardships. People are thinking about their stomachs. I think I'll stop there to allow questions.
Okay. I also want you as an editor to speak about the laws. These laws, what kind of effect do they have when you're planning, when you have a diary meeting and you've got a big story? Do you look at the person involved? Do you look at a potential comeback? Do you look at the potential of being arrested and say, no, let's pack this story? Does that have an effect on news gathering?
Yes, it does significantly. I'm aware that some stories are not being pursued because editors first think about their safety, about and their security, not because they don't want to write the stories, but they are afraid of being arrested. I think Mr. Mhlanga has narrated to us the ordeal that he went through. And these are the things that play in the minds of most editors before they publish a story. The laws are a hanging a knife, a hanging threat to the editors and by extension the reporters. The laws were bad laws that have made the practice of journalism in Zimbabwe very, very compromised. Editors and journalists first think about the laws. They don't want to go through what Mr. Mhlanga went through. The laws are bad, Mr. Owen. This is what I want to emphasize. The laws are very, very bad. And this has affected the quality of our journalism in Zimbabwe. Some stories are not being written because editors are afraid to go through what Mhlanga went through and what Madam Faith Zava went through.
Yes, thank you so much for your response. As we know, Blessed's case is still in the courts. Madam Faith Zaba, editor of the Zimin, still has that court case hanging over her head, and we have a colleague who has been incarcerated since February, and he hasn't been tried as yet. So you know these threats are indeed real. Leo, amongst all of us here, you've been the most vocal about the poor working conditions and the poor salaries. Can you briefly describe the working conditions that journalists?
Thank you so much, Owen, and yeah, thank you so much for not making me speak on the other aspects and speak mainly on the economic. Well, I think the state of Zimbabwe's economy is the biggest threat to media development and proper journalism. This is outside the political interests, and it has become a reflection of our economy. And because employers prefer not to pay, because if you employ someone, definitely you are employing him or her with understanding of how you're going to pay them. Now, because employers do not want to pay, I'm not going to say they do not have, because that's another issue. You can't just employ someone. Because they don't want to pay, they have now juniorized the newsroom. It's now made up of junior reporters who are easily manipulated. I'll give you an example. Newsday went the whole of last year without paying salaries. What happened? During that time, senior journalists went on strike or go slow. You can pick the word to use, the correct one. When they went on strike or go slow, junior reporters were expected to report and work every day for no salary. So it's a two-pronged situation. In fact, it's multi-pronged. There's the political aspect, which we've been talking about, the judiciary, which are Blessed highlighted, the economic, and then the employers themselves. Probably save Zim Papers, maybe ZBC, and a handful of privately owned papers. All the other young journalists are working either for salaries which do not make sense, or they are not being paid at all. And that affects their performance as much as the abuse of law or of the judiciary affects their work too. A threat on my life, probably from a certain political party activist, and the absence of remuneration after I put in the work is almost similarly a threat to my survival. And that is the current situation in Zimbabwe. You find young journalists who are in the same position, who are doing the same work for little pay or no pay, when older journalists are getting something. The money which young journalists who are being paid are getting cannot be compared at all to what journalists were earning probably between 2013 and 2016 or 2017. That can't be compared. Yet we are performing the bulk of the work. We covered the COVID story. It was mainly written by young journalists. The older ones who wrote it, probably they were digging deeper, which might not, they were digging deeper. We are doing the investigations. We are writing the in-depths. We are covering everything from politics to entertainment to sport. But the remuneration, the situation on the ground, the way young journalists are surviving, they've become celebrities with no sense. The kind of people, the kind of persons who are well known, but might be a disgrace in society. Hana chunu, uyanozikanwa nembiri, but hana chunu. That kind of situation, and it's mainly because of one, our economy, and two,
Sorry, Leo.
employee.
Sorry, Leo. I'll come back to you.
I'll come back to you.
I just want to give an opportunity to Njabulo to respond to this before he goes.
Okay.
Yes. And Njabulo, how are your journalists surviving as experts if they are going for 6 months without salaries and so forth? I think maybe he might have left us. But Leo, maybe you can answer that question as you carry on. How are journalists surviving then?
I'm there. I'm there. I'm there. It's a very, very, very difficult situation for our journalists. They are living from hand to mouth. We have cases where some journalists have been involved in crimes, crimes such as robbery and fraud. This is the sad state of affairs, my colleagues. I'm aware that some journalists are also now hustlers, selling vegetables, selling watermelons and stuff. They're hustling. If you go to newsrooms, we find some of our colleagues selling sweets, selling cakes, selling scones. And then the sad part is that extortion and soliciting for bribes is now seen.
Hello, Njabulo. I think we've lost Njabulo there. But anyway, thank you, Njabulo, for responding to that. Leo, how are the young journalists surviving in Zimbabwe? There's been concern around this issue of brown envelopes, even from the employers. Is this something real? Is this happening?
Thank you. You know, that question made me realize something. There's a young journalist I was having a conversation with last week, and then I was asking him where he was staying, and then he told me that he's still staying with his parents. He's 27 years old, and I was like, it's time you left your parents' home so that you grow and stuff like that. And then I realized that no, this is the situation with most of them. They cannot even afford to move out, because moving out comes with a lot of responsibilities they cannot afford to they cannot afford at the present moment. You see, that's one of the things. And then when you speak of brown envelopes, we cannot easily speak of or quickly speak of brown envelopes and quickly head to young journalists and try to, let's say, explain how they are surviving. Why? I can tell you that the most corrupt journalists are senior journalists. Why? The youngest journalist doesn't have any name to put him in any conversations with these big moneyed guys who would want to pay not to be in the papers or to be in the papers. It is the older ones. Now, unfortunately, the younger ones might get crumbs. Crumbs do not ensure survival. And it's unfortunate that I'm not speaking of crumbs as if it's something, of bribe crumbs as if it's something which is good. But it has become increasingly difficult to preach ethics to young journalists when they look up to their seniors and see that they are surviving through unethical means, and they are suffering by trying to be ethical as they were taught at college. So it has become increasingly difficult, especially for the younger ones who are either earning $100 or are not earning at all. You see, so it's a challenge, not just for Yoja, but I think it's now a national crisis, which which goes all the way back to the economy, like I said, all the way back to the political aspect, like I also highlight, like Blessed also highlighted the judiciary, which was also highlighted earlier. But that is the situation we have in this country. And I was trying to highlight that no, we can't quickly go to young journalists when we highlight bribes, because the most corrupt journalists we have come across, we know of, are senior journalists.
Thank you, Leo. Forthright is always. Editors might also be taking bribes. Let's move to Mary. Mary, you're a young journalist, an investigative journalist. You've made strides. You're an award-winning journalist. You've ventured into entrepreneurship with She Corresponds Africa, an all-female newsroom. How has that been in such an environment? Can you share your experiences? What threats have you seen? How have you managed to keep your head above the water?
Thank you so much for the question and the opportunity to be here. It's been a bumpy ride. At first, it was okay because we could get some grants from media partners, but now with the not so recent developments, it has become worse. And of course, here and there you get individual story grants, but they're not enough to suffice as far as the full operation of a small newsroom is concerned. So, yeah, we're trying to look for funds through other avenues, but it's been hectic, and I hope that the situation will change pretty soon.
As a young female journalist, how have you managed to navigate this treacherous terrain? I mean, looking at the arrests, the threats that are there, and so forth, how have you managed to navigate that? Do you have to self-censor? How do you approach your work? And this report that was written spoke about, highlighted that women journalists face peculiar threats, online harassment, bullying, and what have you. Can you share your story?
All right. I'm fortunate to have been part of a lot of trainings and mentorship programs that have helped me to relatively develop thick skin. And through those interactions, I also managed to establish relationship with seasoned journalists like yourselves, whom when I get an issue or when I get a problem, I'm able to communicate and ask guidance. Of course, I remember an incident. I had faced threats before in form of calls, in form of being scolded on social media and all. But for the first time in my life, I think sometime last year, I was publicly humiliated at a gathering after I had asked a question. And it's unfortunate that this happened after I had taken a couple of months off work. And when I came back, a lot of things had changed in regards to what Leo was talking about, that people now attend diaries and are given transport money in court so that they write favorable things regarding whoever would have invited them to those particular diaries. So I didn't know, I wasn't in sync with what was happening. And it so happened that I was the only one who stood up and asked the question. And other journalists were literally looking at me as if I'm crazy by asking a question. So a particular minister dressed me down, told me that I had bulldozed the event, when I had followed all procedure, told me that I was a nobody and all, and I really felt humiliated. And I was so shaken because it was like, I want you to be at my office. Was it on a Wednesday or something like that? And I called one of my mentors asking for advice. I was actually scared to come back to town with the transport that they were providing for journalists because I was like, maybe something will happen to me, since it was the first time I'd experienced something like that. But with what has been happening in recent times, I literally self-censor. That when Owen reached out and was talking about this particular report and this Zoom meeting, I had to think twice before saying yes, because I was like, would I be okay? Would I be safe after being part of such a space? And I think things took a turn in a sharp way when we went for the previous general election. Personally, I didn't expect things to turn bad this quick, but things have gotten worse. And before I do anything, I now think twice about it. Before I pitch any story, I now take a lot of time to think and ask myself, is this worth it? Would it be worthy, me leaving my child and go to jail and stuff like that? So truthfully speaking, as an individual, I'm scared. That's how I really feel. And I hope that the situation will change for the better. And I think it's unfortunate that due to the PVO and the registration of non-governmental organizations and all, I feel like most support partners who are into media advocacy and all relatively remained mum when it came to a lot of issues that were happening as far as the welfare of the media and journalists in Zimbabwe is concerned, because of maybe them fearing that their registration would not be approved or anything of that nature. But I feel like we have regressed a lot as far as that is concerned. And I also kind of understand them, because what good is it to have the organization shut down to begin with? So, yeah, personally, I'm scared and I hope that things get better soon.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. That's the environment. It gets people scared sometimes, but thank you for agreeing even to be on this panel, for that bravery. We have a hand from Buhle. Buhle, can you say a minute or so, try to say what you want to say before we round up by looking at what needs to be done, what Zim journalists can do around the issues that have been raised. We didn't touch much about surveillance, and yet surveillance was also one of the issues that was raised. So as we round up, let's also talk about issues around surveillance. Masuku also has his hand up. So from Buhle, we're going to Masuku. Thank you so much. Maybe we can start with Masuku. Masuku, can you please respond?
Fine, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation, quite a very fertilizing conversation around issues of capture and how journalists are being precarized in our environment. I think it was disturbing to hear from Blessed that sometimes advocacy groups disappear when journalists find themselves in difficult times. And I hear Mary is also mentioning this similar concerns. I think this is very concerning that sometimes we just want to be seen only when probably someone is implicated in a particular form of threat, then later on we look away as if their problems have gone away. I think it's particularly concerning, especially when you listen at Blessed, that by the time he was in jail, a lot of groups were making a lot of noise, but when he came out, very few people wanted to stand next to him. I think that trend is very much concerning. I also want to touch on what Leo was saying about precarization of journalists. I think the majority of journalists are earning next to nothing, like he was basically saying, and some of them are basically an appendage of certain political parties. Journalists have reduced themselves from being journalists to becoming commissariats of certain political parties. And one of the sad stories that I recently heard is that journalists now even queue for chicken in after some of the events. It's so saddening. It's unbelievable sometimes how things have gone so wrong in terms of employment, to the extent that journalists can wait for chicken in. And I was saying to myself, if the people that are working for those organizations, assuming people go to a certain chicken outlet and they are waiting for chicken, and the workers there know these people are journalists, what kind of image are we sending out to the people? It goes on to show how bad the situation has gone. In some circles, you actually hear that some of the journalists have also been recruited and they are informers for certain political outfits, actually perpetuating the threats that journalists are facing. So sometimes you find that journalists are now preferring not to attend certain events, but just to get speeches, maybe press releases, and write their stories from there, which on its own is affecting the quality of journalism in our country. I think as constituents, we need to really find ways of dealing with this threat. I think economic precarization is one of the biggest threats that journalists are facing, which then affects a lot or a number of issues, like Leo is pointing to issues to do with accommodation, issues to do with welfare and the likes. So we have got a multiplicity of factors that are contributing to why journalists find themselves in a precarized environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Masuku. Rihanna and Martin had their hands up. Rihanna, we can start with you. Can you just make your contribution in the quickest possible time?
Sorry, a very quick one. When we're looking at this, I think, there's so much to discuss, so I'm sure follow-up sessions would be great. I think the issue of sextortion, we should also come into it, because I know that in this situation where the whole issue of, how do journalists survive, what do they do, there's been many instances of women, and I suspect at this stage, young men too, who are being coerced into certain relationships so that they can, get work or whatever. So that's also something that we should, interrogate going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Rihanna. Kuda Martin.
Thank you very much. I think the temptation is to respond to quite a number of issues, but I'll stick to an assurance to say, colleagues, I do work with the Zimbabwe Peace Project, and our work is documenting and monitoring human rights violation. And particularly, we're developing a program around freedom of expression. The challenges that journalists are facing in terms of lawfare, in terms of targeted attacks, is a calculated one, because everyone out there has got fear. And the more journalists are targeted, then the more people out there who look up to journalists, who look for information, have more fear and cannot express themselves. So I think for civil society, for media organizations, the challenge is to then look around how we do our advocacy so that, number one, we strengthen the capacity of journalists themselves to go around issues of lawfare, to go around issues of self-censorship. Because mostly self-censorship, maybe unlike what Njabulo says, is not just about money, but it's mostly about the fear of our lives, of what happens to our family. So we then have to direct our advocacy towards the laws, issues to do with data protection, cybersecurity, and then really, like what other colleagues have said, find creative ways of promoting freedom of expression, but also be there for each other as journalists. I think we have done that. It's unfortunate that Blessed has bad experiences, but about development partners, civic society partners not being there for them, for him, but we also have to live in a reality that there isn't money out there, and some of the organizations that really funded freedom of expression are actually pulling out. So we have to really stand for each other and find ways of making sure that we continuously support each other, but we also promote and advocate for freedom of expression. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kuda, and other contributors. And we're already looking at what needs to be done. And from I get a sense that there's a whole lot of advocacy that is needed in Zimbabwe around these issues. And Interwatch, I'm aware, has also been involved in training, cybersecurity training. I'm aware that some colleagues who are part of this discussion attended a workshop in South Africa last year. It was a regional workshop where there was training on physical security and all other forms of security, including data storage and so forth. And I think I get a sense that there's need to expand this kind of training, this kind of capacitation. And there was also a follow-up by Interwatch into individual countries where they trained journalists on issues to do with cybersecurity, how to secure communications and so forth. And this could be one of the ways that one of the things that can be done to capacitate journalists in an environment where there's so much surveillance. But I just wanted to, I will go back to Nigel and also to Leo and Mary. What do you think are the urgent things that need to be done? Some colleagues like Rihanna, like Buhle and Martin have already spoken about advocacy around so many issues. But what else do we need to do as journalists? And what space can an organization like Interwatch, which also which trains journalists on security matters and so forth, what can such an organization do in a space like Zimbabwe? I'll start with you, Nigel.
Yes, thanks, Owen. Before I respond directly to your question, I feel it prudent that I just respond to an issue that was first put to the fore by Blessed and I think augmented by other colleagues around solidarity, as it were, in particular that post-arrest after the release of press statements and making appearances at court and really doing engagements, you then rarely see media advocates or advocacy bodies and so forth. Just to push back a little on that particular one, by also just reflecting and speaking not only on the role of advocacy groups or support organizations, but more broadly, on the capacity issues and at times where these support groups can start and end. I just feel it's important so that it's something that may, for our members, for our constituency, for our stakeholders to really understand. So to just start with, really the role of media support organizations or advocacy groups beyond solidarity. Actually, solidarity should not be even at the crux of the work that these organizations do. Why? Because the broader work is on engagement on the operating environment, on the policy environment, on improving the sector, on enhancing the professionalism of the sector. But within that, there is that recognition that there are these existing threats that, okay, be they physical, be they the question of arrest, be they legal, and so forth. So you would have a defense fund, a pool of lawyers that are always at hand to provide legal support. There is some support that is given in making the issue known in the country, in the region, and in various actors that can influence the release or the change or the support. There is never at any given point support that can then necessarily cover the journey with any particular individual to the extent that you can even get psychosociological support. If you are fortunate to get that particular support, that support is always motivated and it's provided. But if it's not, there's only so much that support organizations can do. In any event, in these days where basically there is a pure voluntarism and there is no financial support, as it were, a lot of this support that is being provided is being done on a voluntary basis. So to then expect the volunteers to then go beyond raising the issues, doing the statements, doing whatever it is they would have done within their confines, and expect more, I think would be taking the matters a bit far and perhaps unfair on those professional bodies and support organizers. I thought I should just make that point. In terms of going forward, I think number one, we need to really look at what is there. And what is there is we have a media police. What is there is we have a media practitioners bill that is within the corridors of the Attorney General, which means it is going to be soon in front of our legislature. What is there is a police media action plan, a commitment by police that they would want to ensure the safety and security of journalists. What is also there is an avenue or an engagement platform that government has sort of created for us to be able to influence whether the review of the law and the review of policy and the review of practice. So we need to start at that level to say we've got a policy with its strategic pillars, that of media economic sustainability, that of media plurality and diversity, that of capacity building and capacity strengthening, that of digital convergence. Let us work on the mechanisms and framework of implementing that, of holding government accountable to that, of ensuring that the policy imperatives are implemented. And we use that as the entry point to engagement, to use cabinets on documents launched by the president, to then say, let us utilize that as a primary source of engagement, to say you affirmed to doing this for the media, and let us do that. Secondly, let us really and truly have like a wholesale, if you like, converged reform trajectory. What we have been having so far are these piecemeal reforms, where you have IPA being repealed, one law being enacted, but in essence, we have a glossary of these, legislation that requires attention. So you'd find in the criminal code, there are provisions that restrict the media or that restrict free expression. They are there in the Cyber and Data Protection. They are there in the Broadcasting Services Act. They are there in the Entertainment and Censorship Controls Act. They are there in the Official Secrets Act. There is this a wide scope. They are there in the Interceptions of Communication Act. The question of surveillance without judicial oversight. So we need to at least have a holistic framework where we then say, okay, an audit, if you like, of sorts, of all these provisions and laws that impact on journalism. And we begin to then say, okay, how do we redress them by way of either holistic amendments? I think, when we amend laws, constitutional amendment bill, as an example, has in excess of 20 amendments that can happen. We can also adopt a similar approach insofar as addressing the nuggets that are affecting the media. And then we need, obviously, the conversation on economic sustainability, because we might protect and safeguard the interest of an industry, of a media, which will no longer be there, which would have lost its audiences, which would have lost its relevance, which would no longer be a central figure. Yet it is imperative that we continue to have public interest journalism. We continue to have investigative journalism. So we need to converse around how we can ensure that is supported, how we can feed in the sustainability of the media from a policy perspective, from an institutional perspective, from an investment perspective, from an audience restoration perspective, and even from a media literacy perspective. So those are some of the interventions that could potentially be there, and there is definitely a scope for various partners to engage, be it on research, be it on support, be it even on use of new digital tools that are safer, and that can be used in the frame to push back or to safeguard against surveillance or to promote ethical use of AI. All of that, there is scope for partnership. There is scope for engagement on those. Let me end here. Thanks, Owen.
Yeah, thank you so much. The aim is to finish in the next 5 minutes. So I see there are hands that are up. There's Mlondolozi and Tonio. I'm giving you 1 minute 30 seconds, and the same with Tonio. Can you kindly make your contributions before I move to Leo? Is Mlondolozi still there? Maybe Tonio?
Everyone. Poor network.
Yes.
Comrade Owen,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, Mlondolozi, go ahead.
Okay, mine will be a contribution on the question of media sustainability.
Yes.
I'm saying mine will be a contribution on the question of media sustainability.
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you loud and clear.
I believe that because of the shrinking in the civil space or in the donor space, we need to start having serious conversations around how journalists or how media houses can actually benefit from the government media fund. Because we have all complained when we had the amendments to the Broadcasting Services Act around the funding of ZBC. So I think that we also need to have conversations around how we can benefit, because particularly in terms of public interest journalism, how we can benefit from that fund, not just for ZBC only, because it is money that is coming from the citizens, and there is need for us to have conversations on how we can start benefiting in terms of public interest journalism, so that journalism does not die. So I think it is something that we should think around how we can have advocates around all media houses benefiting from that fund, so that it doesn't become about ZBC only. So I think it's a conversation that we need to think about. Of course, looking into issues of capture and so forth. That would be my that would be my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mlondolozi. Antonio, can you be as quick as Mlondolozi? I think we've lost Tonio. So we can move to Leo. Leo, what do you think? What's the way forward, Leo?
Thank you so much. I will speak on the economic and the welfare of journalists. Firstly, I'll try to be as quick as possible. Firstly, we need to restructure our media industry so that it reflects the modern or 21st century nature of the media. By that, I mean totally moving online, doing away with printing as that is eating into money or funds that can be channeled towards our welfare. The third point would be to retrain or fire administrators, because these are the people who are earning the most but doing the littlest job. Those guys should either be retrained or they should be fired. And then to save journalism in the current situation where Zimbabwe doesn't have money, media organizations seem to not have money, I think privately owned media specifically should engage people like Nyamutumbu, people like you, and other experts who have knowledge on how to apply for editorial support, that is probably support for investigations, trainings, or even exchange programs. And then there is need for increased pressure for government to set up a National Employment Council for the media, so as to deal with employers who are taking advantage of the Zimbabwean situation to hoard students and young journalists, so as to either pay peanuts or not pay at all. That's my concluding remarks and everything else. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leo. Mary, you felt threatened. What would you want to see going forward that would make you feel safer as a female journalist operating in this hostile environment?
The continued solidarity from journalists, the continued support. At the same time, if media advocacy organizations can do a little bit more. I understand that the issue funding is limited at the moment, and a lot of programs that were in place were cut. But I feel like if they can stand behind us, it will be of great value and important. And also solidarity from journalists. You find that, like what some other colleagues said, some journalists have actually become commissars for certain people and certain political parties, that even in a safe space whereby your colleagues, you don't feel safe anymore because what you say might end up reaching, other ears, so to say, in simple English. So yeah, I think that would be great for a start. And we see how it goes once the advocacy continues, of course.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists and also to thank Mary, the co-author of this report. I also want to thank colleagues who participated and made contributions, and everyone who took time to listen to this conversation. I know it's something that we could have done over a longer period of time because there are so many issues to talk about in the Zimbabwe, on the Zimbabwe. Oh, Tonio is here. Okay. Tonio, I'll let you speak. But all the same, we couldn't go through everything, but I think the discussion was rich and the recommendations were taking a note. And where Interwatch can play a role in terms of training, in terms of material and so forth, that will be done. And as Interwatch does this kind of webinars throughout the region, we're also looking at similarities and which areas need working on. So perhaps there could be partnerships with organizations like ZNF, MAS, and so forth. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'd ask Tonio to speak. He's back online. This will be our final contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Owen. Sorry, I think I had some connectivity issues. I'm a bit in a bad network reception. I think most of the things that have really been said, spoken into. But I think what I would just want to finalize on, which I really feel is very important, is we are on our own as various media stakeholders. I think it's very important that we continuously try and find each other and make sure that we continue to find reason, a voice of reason, and continuously come together. I was a bit impressed, obviously, but not to the levels I would have wanted, specifically during the time when our fellow colleague, President Mhlanga, was also arrested. I could see some form of unison in terms of media advocacy and media associations, people coming together, speaking out against that. It wasn't one of the easiest of the times, very difficult, but people came together, they made voices come through. So I think it's very, very important that as media practitioners, we continuously do this. There's another fellow journalist who has been incarceration, I think, for more than 4 months. You've already spoken about that. I'm not seeing as much as appetite or noise in terms of making sure that we represent them. Very few media houses have been speaking to that or speaking about that. I think I'm having a bit of feedback unless if it's my side. So I strongly feel that is one of the most important things, finding our voices to come together and fully understanding that no one is going to come and try and save us except ourselves. Last but not least, I think for media owners, I think also we have to be much more innovative and creative around the issues of media sustainability. I don't think that our government is going to have an interest in coming in and save the media sector, specifically the private sector, so that it helps it to be much more sustainable. I don't think it's it's going to be one of its top priorities. Yes, we are going to be engaging and calling out for that. But I think that onus is going to be left mainly on us as our various media owners to say how best are we going to be creative and be innovative to make sure that we remain sustainable during these most difficult times. Because as it stands, more and more journalists actually losing jobs, they're getting out of work. And each and every single year, we've got more and more students coming from various universities knocking our doors in terms of the media attachment and training. So we are really the only answers to our own problems, and we need to find more creative and innovative ways to make sure that we self-sustain and we pass through this. And I don't think that there's going to be anyone else except ourselves who's going to help ourselves. So I think we are on our own, and only us are the best solutions to just try and help ourselves. So I think I'll be just very quick and brief there outside the normal time that you'd given me. But those are my quick, short parting remarks, Owen, and thanks for this one.
Thank you so much. Maybe as a final point, if you look at the group chat, you will find a link to reports that have been written by Interwatch, and there are also manuals there. And there are so many manuals that can be useful for journalists that are operating in Zimbabwe. Manuals around security, what you need to know, and what you need to do, how you can secure your communication and so forth. So please just find time to go through those manuals and learn. As journalists, we need to constantly learn and improve ourselves, especially those that are operating in a hostile environment like ours. You need to know the telltale signs of you being surveilled, for example, what to do, how to secure your communication and so forth. Colleagues, thank you so much. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you for the contributions. Thank you so much, everyone, and all the best.